And this is what our research says everywhere. People who read more for pleasure do well on these tests. They can't help it. They acquire the vocabulary, they acquire the grammatical structures, etc. These are all countries, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Italy, Singapore, that did very well on pearls. They did spectacularly well. In fact, Hong Kong was #1 in the world. And these are all countries where poverty seemed to be low. We compared these 4 countries to other high-scoring, low-poverty countries. And we found, despite the high test scores, people didn't like to read. The children didn't like to read. Even worse, the parents didn't like to read. Our conjecture is this: you get a high Pearl score, the normal way is by reading a lot, pleasure reading. But in these countries, they're taking alternative ways. They're not doing it by self-selected reading, they're doing it through required reading and through test preparation. Test preparation is like putting a match, a fire, under the thermometer and claiming that you raise the temperature of the room. By giving students strategies for doing well on these tests, by telling them to look out for tricky questions, telling them make sure you don't turn 2 pages at once, back in the days when we used pages, etc. Study after study over the last 3-4 decades shows that high poverty means low test scores again and again. No, we don't need more testing. We need better food programs, we need basic medical care, and we need better libraries, obviously. You can have the best teaching in the world, and it's not going to help if the child is hungry, if the child is ill, teeth hurt, can't see the board, and they have nothing to read. Just that one book, once a year, closes the gap between the rich and poor anywhere from 25% to 50%. If we do it even a little, it's going to help. The United States Department of Education has an obsession with competition. We've got to win. We've got to be #1 in everything we do. The race to the top increased testing, my estimate, about 20 times what we had before. The effect of taking a standardized test to predict college achievement, the SAT. The SAT added nothing to the prediction. Teachers' evaluations of students is the best measure we have. A heroic movement called opt-out. Opt-out was begun by parents, public school teachers, and a few university professors on 0 budget. It spread by word of mouth. In New York State last year, 20% of the public school students eligible to take the test did not take the test.
Both PISA and TSA are actually system-level assessment, as I said before. But then, during the process, we will use this score to identify individual school. So for TSA, the government have individual school ID, so they can really abuse it, not just misuse it, to make school accountable for the percentage correct report every year to the individual school. But that is not fair, particularly for TSA, because in the primary level, all students are entering their school by residential criteria. So all schools will have very different family background. So actually we have a very comprehensive assessment system. If we stop the TSA in this little area, that won't ruin the whole assessment system. But we still have a lot of different kinds of surveys to understand the school. In 2014, a group of international scholars, including Stephen Ball, Henry J. Ross, talk about write an open letter to Andres Slider, the leader of the PISA since 2000. They said PISA tests are damaging education worldwide. While standardized testing has been used in many nations for decades, PISA has contributed to the escalation in such testing and a dramatically increased reliance on quantitative measures. This this emphasis on the narrow range of measurable aspects of education make the attention, take the attention away from the less measurable and more immeasurable educational objectives like physical, moral, civic, artistic development, our students' self-concept, anxiety, whatever. This all non-cognitive outcomes are less emphasized anymore because every 3 years, when they report these international results, the media always focus on the ranking. So this kind of new PISA regime, with its contribution, if its continuous cycle of global testing, actually really harms our children and pervades our classroom, and even de-skill the teachers, like what Steve said, and then also endanger well-being of students and teachers. I think Hong Kong should join the US movement, no unnecessary testing, the NUT movement from Steve. And then really creates a space to nurture the competency, the soft skills, the passion, and the compassion of our students. And then really review the roles of all kinds of exams and tests on the student learning, particularly when the test is hurting the children at a very young age. What should we do as a responsive adults? These adults is not just the parents. It includes the teacher, school administrators, principals, policymakers, and scholars.
I have two brief comments. First is that I think we have a wrong focus today because if we want to change the system, we have to work on a high-stake one. So in Hong Kong, in particular, you have to work on a high-stake secondary school placement system, which TSA does not serve that purpose. TSA is a low-stake or no-stake kind of system by design.
K teachers said that TSA is low-stake testing according to design, but just according to design. We all know that it has become a very high-stake assessment in reality. So that is a problem, and if we do not face that reality, we are destined to miss the point.
We, as educationists, don't want to compare schools to factories, but if you have 3 factories, then one has a good output with the standard working hour, another one has a better output but with a lot of overtime work. Which one is the better factory? Which one is more productive? That's something that we have to put into context.
There are no national authorities for testing learning outcomes, nor are there any ranking lists. Moreover, there is no school inspectorate. Evaluation of learning outcomes is based on national surveys. The aim is to produce information that helps both schools and students to develop.
The whole purpose to evaluate is to support the learning of a student. And I think who does it best is the teacher who's very close by, and the other adults and themselves. We have a very strong emphasis on self-evaluation and also evaluation by their peers and by the sort of the community in a way, because we engage also the families and the parents in the sort of participating in the support of growing of the child. Well, we're not perfect. I'm not an expert on that, but I know we have some problems being a remote country with a lot of darkness and harsh weather. Life is very hard in Finland too, but maybe in different respects. So, like Mika said, we try to keep our school sort of a pleasant place and not add to that pressure in schools.
We're seeing kids jumping from buildings, killing themselves. Mr. Tang said that the TSA is actually research, that you're doing research. And I want to know on behalf of my daughter sitting next to me, did you get our consent to use my child as a research subject?
No, I talked about this with scholars, and a professor in Cambridge sent me this article from World Psychiatry 2006, Global Suicide Rates Among Young People aged 15 to 19. And Finland has 9.5 suicides out of 100,000, ranked number 22 in the world. Much, much higher than Japan, Hong Kong. So I think when you talk about suicide, please, don't jump to conclusions. We are looking at the model of Finland because Finland has been considered a success in education. And what is that evidence for success? So far I've heard is doing very well in PISA. But again, if we think about it, an education policy takes time to have an impact. So the fact that Finland has done so well, in fact it's ranked #1 in the world in the first PISA in the year 2000, is presumably because of policies made in the 1980s. But everyone is now rushing to Finland and asking the government of Finland, what are you doing now? Which will not only have an effect 15 years later. So if we look at the Finland model and say, because they are doing so well in PISA, we should learn from it, then by the same token, we have to learn from Hong Kong. Because as we just saw from all those government videos, Hong Kong ranks above Finland. So sometimes we have to understand, we don't cherry pick our statistics. We have to look at the big picture and try to identify things that work for students. And assessment testing can only play a certain part, certain role. It is not the panacea for everything. But it does have its role. And we as educators need to identify that role and try to make as effective use of it as we can and avoid unintended outcomes. So that part I fully agree, and we have to be very careful.
Excuse me, you distorted statistics. Why don't you ask your Finnish friends, is the overall suicide rate higher for adults and for youth? What's the suicide rate for 12 and 13-year-olds? And please answer my question about the research subject.
Like what Professor Ho has been doing with PISA. Although PISA is not tied to a school, but she has been working very hard to try to extract information and try to learn from it and feed back to schools, feed back to educators. In the same way, what we hope to do, of course, is to do the same with TSA data. Of course, we, the Hong Kong EAA, as an organization to implement the TSA, we have not been asked to do any research on the TSA data. Okay, so that's so much we can do. But I do agree that if we can make better use of data, then of course we'll be able to help teaching even more. But sometimes we have to make a balance. How do we make better use of data? Well, one use is to have data available to parents, to make data available to the students, which is what people do elsewhere. But we have shied away from that for the fear of another misuse of data. Because when you put data in the hands of parents, who knows what evil that could lead to?
I think it tells something about the culture in Finland, because it's not really built up to make any fuss about tests. I think the answer is not within the classroom, it's outside the classroom. It's a systemic, it's cultural thing. So it's just education. Education, there's nothing so spectacular about education. It's just you go to school and you make your scores and you come back home and then you have some copies. And that's it. I mean, it's nothing. And as Stephen was saying here, that if you have welfare society, there's no poverty, you have equality. These are basic things. You don't think about these things too much. And it is very interesting now that Finland is going down in these PISA tests. I also feel this is very natural because our system is so badly built up to these kind of competencies.
The 2016 curriculum now is going to come out in Finland. Is they're going to increase the number of hours teachers spend teaching art and craft. So things that children do are now going to be increased in the arts and crafts area. So although we're talking about things like education in comprehension of computers, digitization, etc., actually doing arts and craft is still really, really important for developing the individual.
Now that I've worked in the real world and I realize that actually my creativity comes from being able to connect different things and being able to see how synergies are related to each other. But then when I was a kid, I thought that I failed at a lot of things because that wasn't a competency that was tested. And I feel like a lot of these assessments and these tests just really demotivates a lot of the children because it puts you in the silo of what you're expected to be good at. Is it fair to use the adults' assessments on what they think the children should be good at?
If you're talking about taking 15 years to actually get to see the result, no, it takes 2 years. That's all it takes, 2 years for you to actually see whether, when you switch out of this very exam-based system to actually see the results. There is no need for a quantitative test to actually find out whether it works or not. We're talking about qualities, we're talking about feelings. All you have to do is look at the children.
Education is happening all the time. Or learning is happening all the time and everywhere. How can we deal with that within the education system? So we're trying to incorporate that in our school program, and also we're talking about broad-based competence. It's not about separate subjects anymore that much. We'd like to make more real-life relevance in what's taught in schools. And I think pretty much everybody is in favor of these changes.
The goal of our life, as some people have said, is to discover your talent. School should help you do that. And as Natalie pointed out, what is valuable today will not be valuable 5 years from now, 10 years from now. School is a place to help you discover who you are and what you're good at. And all this testing is categorizing people much too soon, which is why I'm so impressed with the Finnish idea of giving kids time to find out what their interests are.
The good thing about diversity, because we respect different views, and we want these views to all come out in one platform, and we respect each other's views, and then try to come into a solution maybe one day, where at least we know each other's standpoints, and I think it's very important. So keep the respect and keep the discussion going on, and we hope we have some more discussion like this in the future. Thank you very much.